Quake is undeniably one of the most important and influential games of all time. But we're not here for a history lesson today. We're here to talk about why Quake is undeniable. My first time playing Quake was only a couple years ago in 2023, so my commentary on this game will not be coming from a place of nostalgia. When I first ran through the OG Doom games, I did not jump into Quake right after, and when I finally did jump into Quake, I was absolutely kicking myself for not playing it sooner, because Quake fucking rules. Quake, of course, shares some DNA with Doom 1 and 2, but it also distinctively sets itself apart from its ancestors. What they do share in common is having a full arsenal of weapons at your disposal, a roster of enemies to vanquish, and a slate of unique levels to run around. But the weapons, enemies, and levels themselves are unique to Quake. There are a few repeat weapons between Doom and Quake in the shotgun, super shotgun, and rocket launcher, but they have a different feel between the two games. The shotgun is not very powerful, but can be used in a pinch at range. The super shotgun feels plenty powerful, but the fire and reload animation of the super shotgun in Doom 2 will always make that version of the weapon reign supreme. The rocket launcher, though, feels way better in Quake than it did in Doom, and is famous for giving you the ability to rocket jump. Or you can just take the elevator. The weapons that are new in Quake are the axe, which I barely used, the grenade launcher, which we will talk about a bit more later on, there's the thunderbolt, and most notable is the nail gun. The nail gun is iconic and is satisfying to use with its alternating double barrel firing, and later on we'll also get the super nail gun, which does not look as cool but puts out damage way quicker. I'll typically use the regular nail gun against normal enemies and then whip out the super nail gun against any of the more threatening enemies. The best thing about the nail guns to me is how their ammo is presented throughout the world, which has the 9 Inch Nails logo on it, as Trent Reznor from 9 Inch Nails is the one who did the soundtrack for Quake. Here's Trent Reznor with John Carmack himself, and also Trent Reznor wearing a Quake t-shirt with David Lynch, which is such a legendary picture. It's crazy to me that something like putting a band logo into a game like this should be immersion breaking, but it just works here, as 9 Inch Nails album covers look like they exist in the world of Quake anyway. The BFG is missing in Quake 1, while it does make a return in Quake 2, but that doesn't faze me. As I've said in the past, I rarely use the BFG in Doom 1 or 2, as I typically don't want to take ammo away from the plasma rifle in those games, so I wasn't missing it. The cast of enemies in Quake is brilliant, as they all provide a different challenge in a way that is similar to the enemies in Doom, but I think is executed way better in Quake. Some of those improvements may be thanks to the new possibilities that Quake's 3D engine provided, and that simply this did come out after Doom, so I do think it is a bit unfair to compare the two games at times, but the execution of the enemies in Quake is flawless regardless. There are grunts and enforcers who are similar to the zombie soldiers of Doom. Here we'll also have a nice blossom of gore. There are zombies in Quake who aren't very threatening at first glance, but they come with the caveat that they will resurrect unless you blow them up, which typically means you need to hit them with grenades or rockets, which also come with the challenge of avoiding splash damage. So these bags of bones can provide a deceiving amount of challenge. There are rotfish and rottweilers, who I don't think are anything too special, but they are good for a scare or two. We have this enemy, which is the Scrag, who would be Quake's version of the Cacodemon, being that they fly around and shoot projectiles. While I prefer the look of the Cacodemon and the sprite of their eyeball popping out when you kill them, I would say the Scrag are more interesting to fight with their faster movement speed and faster projectile speed. These things are also amphibious, which I did not see coming, but does make sense given their appearance, I suppose. Also, when you die at the hands of a Scrag, the screen says you were scragged by a Scrag, which feels like a book that Rick and Morty squanched a page out of.
Squanch wherever you want, man. Mi casa as a su casa, dog.
All right, I like your squanch.
Rick.
The Fiend is an evolution of the Pinky, given how they come right at you attacking without weapons or projectiles, and that they are both also known as quote-unquote demons. The Fiend is way more exciting to fight than Pinkies thanks to their ability to quickly close the gap on you with their constant leaping. The Fiends are great enemies in how they challenge your spatial awareness. If they catch you, they will destroy you, and the movement you'll need to avoid them can send you off the edge of the map or trap you in a corner if you aren't precise with your movements. It feels so good when you get the strafing down to run circles around these things and show them who's boss. But Quake is not afraid to challenge the player, and will think of new ways to implement fiends, like this instance here where they turn you into a Jill sandwich between two fiends with very little space to work with and a pool of lava threatening below. Just look at the sick smile on these things as they patiently wait to ruin our day. I love them. Another enemy that leaps around but is more of a pain in the ass is the Spawn, that we encounter later in the game. These things are just easy to miss, and once they start moving, they're hard to hit. If you kill them, they explode, so you gotta try to kill them at somewhat of a distance. They are the biggest nuisance in the game, if you ask me, which made it extra satisfying to see one luckily get squished in these moving stairs here, which I could not recreate if I tried. In a perfect world, you kill them before they start moving, but if you don't, good luck. It's funny they look so unassuming while probably also being the toughest enemy in the game, at least for me. I nearly shit myself when this trap started pushing me into this den of spawns, and also when this batch of them dropped in here. I love a good challenge, so I respect these little guys, but definitely not my favorite. Another pain in the ass enemy, but one that I'm more of a fan of, is the Vor. The Vor are the evolution of the Revenant from Doom. There isn't much in common in terms of appearance between the two, as we get a nice look at these nasty beings here. The comparison comes from their main attack being a heat-seeking projectile, but the Vor's attack might be the most unshakable heat-seeking projectile in video game history. It never ceases to amuse me the lengths this thing will go to chase you down, which means two things. It means it is super satisfying when you outmaneuver one of these pods, and it also means that the Vor dominates any room they are in, forcing you to strategize around them. They will kill you quick if you don't get into cover, and will sometimes still come find you if you don't get into cover quickly enough. This speaks to the difference in gameplay between Quake and Doom. There is some careful gameplay in Doom, but I typically think of Doom 1 and 2 of being more run and gun, whereas Quake, in my experience, requires more patience and peeking corners. That type of gameplay is mostly driven by the ogres. The ogres are one of the most frequently encountered enemies in Quake, but also might be the best enemy in Quake. For starters, they look badass with their evil dead-like chainsaw arm that can deliver scares like this, but they also have a grenade launcher in the other hand that makes them a dynamic enemy and a dictator of the pace of this game. Like I was mentioning with the Vor, how they force you to play carefully and peek around corners. The ogres are masters of area denial, with their grenades that they bank off of walls and that can follow you for a surprising amount of distance. It is exhilarating when ogres are firing at you and you have to think if your best move is to step forward or step back, with stepping forward getting you out of cover and being more susceptible to what other enemies may lie ahead, versus stepping backward, which keeps you near cover but could have you stepping on a grenade if there's a wall behind you. Weighing out if it's worth holding your ground or pushing forward is a constant equation that I love solving or sometimes failing to solve when faced with an ogre. And the game finds ways to complicate the equation, like monster closeting another ogre behind you, or placing you in the middle of nail traps that limit your ability to retreat. And then there's some brilliant level design in this game that will put you into scenarios where it is just chaos, with their grenades bouncing in and equations go out the door and survival instincts kick in, forcing you to move. Where you'll end up once those instincts kick in is a whole nother conversation. And two can play at this game, as you can see. Banking grenades back at them makes the hiding around corners gameplay fun against ogres and any enemy really. I love getting the angles just right with the grenade bank shots, and I love getting the arc just right on the lob shots as well. The enemy that I think rivals the ogre for best enemy in Quake is the Shambler. The Shambler feels like the evolution of the Archvile from Doom, with its taller stature. It throws its arms up as it attacks. It demands your focus whenever you see one, and that you must break line of sight with it to stop it from hitting you with its devastating range attack. This enemy again challenges your spatial awareness and incentivizes corner peeking, as you won't want to get caught out in the open and will want to be able to dip into cover to dodge their lightning attack. Or you can try to land right in that mid-range sweet spot where you're close enough that they switch to their melee attack, but not close enough that they land the melee attack. It's a simple design for the appearance of the Shambler, but I love it. Covered in blood and that damn smile. I love those big old teeth and love watching my boy get his cardio in here. Good for him. The look combined with how strong they are makes them a frightening foe to face. They are strong, but the Super Nail Gun and Thunderbolt can take them down pretty swiftly. Just make sure you don't use the Thunderbolt in the bathtub. It is worth mentioning that the Quake combat is not always hiding around corners, as you can run and gun as well, especially when you find yourself a quad damage power-up that allows you to jib enemies in a display of the great explosive gore in this game, or a pentagram of protection which makes you invulnerable and provides the satisfaction of staring a Shambler right in the face. Or if you're lucky, you can find both the quad damage and the pentagram to really go on a rampage. You can also find this ring that turns you invisible if you want to feel like Frodo at the Prancing Pony Inn, and I always get a kick out of the eye-popping way this power-up changes our avatar at the bottom of the screen. This felt real good using that invisibility to sneak up on those pesky spawns. Take that, you little bitch! The last of the enemies are the Knights, who will warn us of their presence with the nice audio cue of an unsheathing sword when they are aggroed. There are the standard red knights that usually show up as a group and come running, swinging their swords at you, and there are the stronger, more badass death knights, who swing their sword as well, but also have this projectile attack in addition to their sword. I love their projectile attack in that it spreads out and moves at a slow enough speed that you can dodge or jump it if you are far enough away. I love the projectile of the Death Knights and the visual that comes along with it, but for both knight enemies, I just love how perfectly they fit into the dark, spooky castle atmosphere of Quake. I've never been a particular fan of the Lovecraftian aesthetic, but it just hits perfectly in Quake. The enemies, music, and levels just pair together so well to create an atmosphere that is engrossing, captivating, and just perfect. Quake's music is something you really have to sit in to appreciate, and I feel is not well suited for me playing snippets in this review to do it justice. If you've played the game, I think you know what I mean, and if you haven't played the game, what are you waiting for? To not completely cop out on the soundtrack and paint a little bit of a picture, I'll say this music here in the first level of the game makes me feel like I'm trapped in a microwave. That's Quake for you. So what about the levels in Quake? First off, the levels are separated into 4 episodes that we need to enter through these gates in our hub area, which I love the presentation for. Each new episode starts with us losing the weapons we have procured in the previous episode, which is my preferred way of experiencing a game like this, starting each episode off like Naked Snake. Like I mentioned, the aesthetic of Quake is amazing. There's the castles, facilities, and mysterious halls that are all pretty bland in terms of color, but that's the point. I love how seamlessly they work skulls into the walls of the game. There are several locations where if you don't stop, you might just see a design and not notice the skull carvings that adorn the walls. It's the most badass wallpaper I've ever seen. Apart from the look of the levels, the level design, in terms of the gameplay they provide, is elite to this day. The moments where the Quake level design impresses me most is when you go through an area, the map twists and turns, throws all sorts of action at you, and then brings you back to the area where you started. But when I get back to that starting point, the thought hits me of, holy shit, I was so in a trance that I forgot we were even trying to get back to this point. Or in the later levels of the game, there were times where I even forgot that we were still even in this level, with how big of a journey we were on. This is something that I always loved about the level design in Souls-like games, where you explore and then find a shortcut back to where you started, sometimes without even realizing you were about to be looping back to where you started. That to me is a measure of immersion and great level design that I credit the Souls games for doing, but here's Quake 30 years ago doing the same thing. I enjoyed the levels all throughout Quake. For comparison, Doom 2, while being a game I hold dear, does have a couple levels that will leave me annoyed or lost. I don't think I was annoyed or lost at any time throughout Quake, but I also felt that I was being adequately challenged and had to replay certain sections. That balance of satisfying challenge without getting to the point of annoyance is a sweet spot that is different for everyone, but for me personally, Quake lands firmly in that sweet spot. Quake finds so many ways to stick you into different sticky situations, tight rooms, trap doors in the floor into tight rooms, spike spitting traps, this elevator of death that combines a tight space with spike spitting traps. At one point I fell into a fucking Rancor pit, which was awesome. And speaking of Star Wars, this sequence I showed earlier with the wall closing in is great and harkens back to the trash compactor scene from A New Hope. And in similar fashion, there's this instance where the ceiling starts closing in on us. I started panicking, didn't know what to do, and it was a total fake out. Even watching this clip makes me anxious. It's so good. The most memorable levels of Quake for me all happen to be in Episode 4. Not necessarily the best levels of Quake, but for some reason the ones that always stick out in my mind are the Azor Agony level we just showed, where we start off with the water pool section and then run around a bunch until I forgot where we started. The Palace of Hate always sticks out for me, again, not for being my favorite level, but roaming this fortress and fighting these shamblers down these long halls always sticks out in my memory. And the Tower of Despair, for whatever reason, is the most unforgettable level for me. The great ominous sky we see throughout the game, and then jumping down through this circle of bones is a nice way to start. It's the simplest thing ever, but for some reason I always loved how they put this crossbar here to prevent you from jumping across, which forces you down into what looks like water, but it drops you down through the water into the waiting clutches of a shambler. This very sequence is just burnt into my memory for some reason ever since the first time I played this game. Also, this otherworldly water passage is another log on the fire of me thinking Doom the Dark Ages was supposed to be a Quake game at some point in the process, as they used this same type of gravity-defying water passage in the Dark Ages. I still don't know if this was confirmed anywhere, but I had mentioned it in my Dark Ages video that game felt like Quake more than it felt like Doom, and felt like it should have been a Quake reboot, which would have been nice. Back to Quake. Just like that crossbar I mentioned, the useful simplicity of map elements in Quake is always something I appreciated. For instance, climbing a wall like this is nothing special, but also so cool, I think, as it's way more interesting than taking stairs or an elevator. It's the small things like this that are so inconsequential, but they all just add up to create the perfect experience, known as Quake. The last levels I'll mention are the boss levels, the first being the final level of episode 1, which is just this boss room where we fight Cthon. I believe that's how it's pronounced. It's like Cthulhu, right? You really just run around in a circle to activate this electric attack a few times, but I respect the creativity of creating a boss that you don't need to shoot to kill. And then the only other boss we fight is in the last level of the game with her own level outside of the 4 episodes. Here's her name that I won't try to pronounce, and you'll see she attacks with aura, which is a crazy flex. Just like in Doom, they'll give us a room full of ammo to let us know that shit is about to go down up ahead. The level is a decent challenge, fighting through a gauntlet of shamblers and vores with only a certain amount of ammo at your disposal, while traps along the walls poke at you as well. The first time I played Quake, I definitely did not understand what we had to do to kill the boss and ended up looking it up. Once again, we don't need to shoot the boss, we'll just wait for this sphere to pass through her, and then teleport to kill her from the inside. And that is the end of Quake. It should come as no surprise that Quake is a game that is special to me, and like I mentioned at the start of the video, my adoration for the game is not a product of nostalgia, which I feel speaks volumes to how great this game is. Someone like myself can play it for the first time 20-something years after its release and still fall in love with it. Yes, this was the remastered version, but I still think that goes to show Quake's status as a timeless classic. If you're a fan of Quake, let me know in the comments what Quake means to you. I love to hear stories about what it was like playing Quake back in the day, which I personally don't have any stories of, unfortunately, as I was 2 years old. And I was actually exactly 2 years old, as Quake was originally released on my birthday, so that was cool to find out. Next up on the channel, we'll be diving into Quake 2, which is very different from the first installment, so there will be plenty to talk about there. So consider subscribing if you don't want to miss out on that. I also have reviews up on the channel of every mainline Doom game, including the Dark Ages, as well as some other games if you want to check that out. Alright, Quake guys, the next time we meet, we'll be out on Stragos.